I was standing under the crystal chandeliers of the Grand Ballroom at the Plaza Hotel in Manhattan, holding a champagne glass that cost more than my first delivery truck. When my new daughter-in-law, Madison Vance, took the microphone, the room went dead silent. She looked like a pristine princess in her custom gown, glowing under the opulent lights. I smiled politely from the back, waiting for the usual family acknowledgements. Instead, she pointed a manicured finger at my dark, suffocating corner near the kitchen doors. Table 22. And there everyone, her voice echoed with sharp, classist mockery, is my new mother-in-law, Patricia Novak. Please excuse the heavy smell of scrap metal and grease. She's the old scrap metal witch we have to tolerate tonight. 300 elite guests erupted in roaring, raucous laughter. My son Caleb didn't stand up. He just stared at his shoes and chuckled nervously. Have you ever been treated like an outcast by the very people whose lifestyle you were quietly funding? Drop a comment below with where you're watching from and what time it is right now. Let's see who is part of our hardworking community tonight. Anger wasn't loud this time. It was clinical. I rubbed my eyes trying to summon regret as the roaring laughter of 300 people echoed behind me, but there was only clarity. This wasn't a breakdown. It was a balance sheet. I had been the silent investor in their version of family for too long. My compassion had been a luxury they had overdrafted for years, and the account was officially closed. I didn't yell. I didn't demand an explanation from my spineless son. I simply turned my back on table 22, adjusted the sleeves of my off-the-rack navy dress, and walked out into the cold marble lobby of the Plaza Hotel. The air outside the ballroom was crisp, cutting through the thick layer of expensive perfume and hypocrisy. I found Sarah, the frazzled event manager, leaning over her digital tablet near the grand entrance. I reached into my worn jacket pocket and pulled out a piece of anodized titanium, heavy, black, and unmistakable, the American Express Centurion Black Card. I am making an immediate change to the service contract, I told her, my voice completely flat and lethal. I authorize the full $175,000 charge on this Centurion card for this event. Cancel the Platinum Open Bar immediately. As of this exact second, this is a cash bar, Sarah stammered, her fingers freezing over her screen. But ma'am, shifting to a cash bar now will cause absolute chaos on the floor. Then let it burn, I replied, leaning closer. And I want the prices adjusted to the hotel's absolute maximum corporate rate. $35 for a standard cocktail, $20 for a glass of wine, and $15 for a beer. Instruct your bartenders to collect cash or card for every single drop poured from this moment forward. No exceptions. Not for the bride, not for her father, not for anyone. Execute the change right now, or I contact American Express and issue an immediate chargeback for the entire $175,000 package before midnight. She swallowed hard, looking at the black metal card, then grabbed her radio to update the bar staff immediately. I slid the card back into my old wallet and walked back into the grand ballroom, standing near a massive marble pillar in the back. It took exactly 4 minutes for the structural reality of my decision to hit the room. Douglas Vance swaggered up to the counter, slamming his hand down and demanding a double scotch. The young bartender poured it, set the glass down, and held out his hand. That will be $40, sir. The open bar has been terminated by the host, Patricia Novak. Douglas's face turned a violent shade of purple. He screamed, his eyes scanning the room until they locked onto me. I raised my hand and gave him a slow, silent wave. The panic spread through the crowd like wildfire. Madison stopped dancing immediately as her maid of honor whispered the news in her ear, her face twisted into a mask of pure, unpolished rage. She hiked up the skirt of her custom gown, the one I had secretly financed when Caleb's credit card was declined at the designer, and stormed across the floor toward my pillar. "What do you think you're doing?" she hissed, her voice shaking with malice. "You are ruining my wedding." I looked at her expensive diamonds and spoke with clinical precision. "I didn't ruin your wedding, Madison. I just adjusted the budget. Pretentious behavior is notoriously expensive. Didn't your father teach you that?" Madison's jaw stayed open, but I didn't wait around to watch her piece her dignity back together. I stepped away, retreating further into the shadows of the ballroom, content to let the cash bar panic consume the floor. Inside my jacket pocket, my fingers wrapped around the crisp, thick envelope I had carried all day. Inside was a certified check for $1,500,000. It was supposed to be my surprise wedding gift to them, a down payment on a Tribeca property, so they wouldn't have to face Manhattan's brutal market. With a slow, clinical movement, I tore the check in half inside my pocket. I tore it again and again until it was just worthless paper confetti resting against my ribs. Now I realized it had been a subscription, with me footing the bill. My compassion had been a luxury they had overdrafted for decades. I had spent 20 years with heavy black grease under my fingernails, and the blinding glare of welding torches burning into my skin at Novak Industrial and Heavy Metal Recycling. I wore worn flannel, drove a dented truck, and lived in the same modest Queen's house because the hallway closet still smelled like my late husband's cologne. I had single-handedly funded Caleb's elite private education, paid his personal debts, and signed the check for this entire $175,000 plaza circus. I had cushioned Caleb's whole world, yet here he stood, a weak man in a tailored tuxedo, terrified of his wife's elite status, completely willing to let the mother who built him be branded as a scrap metal witch. Everything stayed silent inside me for a moment, but in my head the lesson became entirely transparent. I had been the silent investor in their version of family, and this is where the invisible chain of parental devotion creates a toxic trap. By shielding my son from the raw friction of the world, I had normalized my own erasure. I had taught him to treat my silent care as an infinite, unearned utility. Madison and her family didn't see a matriarch who commanded the largest steel recycling network on the East Coast. They just saw an easy source of capital wrapped in blue-collar cloth. Douglas Vance charged toward me then, his face deep purple from shouting at the bartenders. He poked a heavy, arrogant finger straight into my shoulder, his breath reeking of high-end liquor. "Listen to me, you miserable scrap metal peasant," he growled. "You turn that tab back on right now, or I will have your Queen's Yard condemned for zoning violations by tomorrow afternoon." I am the executive vice president of Vanguard Steel, and on Monday morning, the board announces me as the new chief executive officer. I can crush your little scrap metal operation with a single phone call. He reached into his pocket, balled up a crumpled $50 bill, and flicked it straight at my face. "Here's an advance tip for the help. Go fix my bar tab." I calmly caught the bill and slipped it into my jacket pocket. I looked at his finger on my jacket and felt a profound, chilling coolness settle into my chest. It was the calm of a predator watching a deer walk straight into a wire snare. "Make your phone calls, Douglas," I whispered back. Completely factual and lethal. "But make sure your cell plan is paid up. Monday is going to be a day none of us will ever forget." I drove back to Queens alone, leaving the glowing Manhattan skyline behind in my rearview mirror. Everything stayed silent for a few hours inside my empty house, but in my head, their public laughter kept echoing like a persistent hammer against iron. By 2 a.m, the digital backlash officially began. My phone buzzed relentlessly against the nightstand, lighting up the dark bedroom with a sudden, aggressive sequence of notifications. Madison didn't send a message of regret or an apology for her venomous stunt on the microphone. Instead, she chose extreme gaslighting. Her texts flooded my screen, sharp and frantic, calling me an unstable, vindictive monster who humiliated her father over a simple joke, claiming I had ruined their entire wedding night and that Caleb was too disgusted to even speak to my face. Seconds later, Caleb sent his own spineless, enabling message, proving he had completely chosen her transactional world over his own mother. His text insisted I had overreacted completely, claiming Madison's family simply possessed a highly sophisticated sense of humor and that I had made a massive scene over a harmless prank. He demanded I call her father right now to apologize and wire $50,000 to cover the credit cards they had been forced to max out for the bar tab, or they would erase me from their lives permanently. By 5 a.m, the toxic campaign moved from private messages to public character assassination. My sister called to tell me that Madison had splashed a derogatory post across her social media profile for our entire extended family and Vanguard's corporate network to see. It featured a glossy photo of the elegant Plaza Grand ballroom with a caption that stated, "True class could not be bought," implying some people spend their lives rolling in the mud of a heavy metal scrapyard and completely forget the basic decency required to raise a family, calling it sad to see jealousy ruin a sacred day. I scrolled through the comments below the post, watching a calculated echo chamber of elite validation form in real time. Her upper-class friends and relatives were actively labeling me as bitter, lower class, and unhinged. There was no remorse, no structural awareness of the fact that my hard-earned money had funded the very floor they had danced on. This relentless gaslighting and public defamation completely greenlit my next sequence of moves. They truly believed their social standing and rented luxury could insulate them from accountability. They thought I was a doormat they could kick repeatedly just to look taller in front of their wealthy peers. I turned the phone face down onto the kitchen counter. The house was dead quiet, the old cracked photo frame of Caleb as a young boy sitting exactly where his apology should have been. I didn't respond with emotional text messages or desperate pleas. I didn't offer a single word of defense. I opened my laptop and pulled up my corporate database, the screen casting a cold blue light across the room. My anger wasn't loud. It was clinical. I dialed the emergency speed line for Arthur Blackwood, ready to transition this family drama into a systematic, professional demolition. It was 6 a.m. when the corporate machinery officially began to grind. Arthur Blackwood answered my private line on the very first ring. He was a ruthless corporate shark who made standard Wall Street litigation teams look like children playing with plastic toys. And I paid his firm a massive monthly retainer to ensure he never slept when Novak Industrial went to war. Patricia, his voice was crisp, instantly calculating the ice-cold precision in my breath. I assume the wedding festivities did not meet expectations. The wedding is over, Arthur, I stated, watching the grey dawn break over the heavy iron structures of my Queen's rail yards. And I want the systematic execution to begin immediately. First, pull up the lease agreement for the Tribeca penthouse on Elm Street, where Caleb and Madison are currently sleeping. That penthouse was a $3,200,000 luxury asset owned entirely by BMK Properties, a stealth holding company I controlled down to the last digit. Caleb genuinely believed he had scored a lucky, independent rent-to-own deal through a vague friend of a friend for a mere $1,200 a month, completely oblivious to the fact that his own mother was subsidizing the remaining market rent every single month out of her own pocket. Because the lease was structured as a corporate executive housing agreement rather than a standard residential tenancy, standard New York renter protection laws didn't apply. Activate Clause 14B, I instructed, my voice entirely flat. Immediate termination of lease for conduct detrimental to the property owner. I want an emergency courier to serve the 24-hour eviction notice face-to-face this morning. If there is so much as a scratch on that custom Italian marble countertop, prepare a separate property damage lawsuit. Consider it done, Blackwood replied, the sound of keyboard strokes clicking like a firing squad in the background. And what about the luxury vehicle? Madison drove a brand new white Porsche Cayenne, a high-end corporate perk leased through an automotive subsidiary that answered directly to my industrial board. Send the recovery team to the Plaza Valet lot right now, I said. Terminate the lease for cause, repossess the vehicle, and dump her personal luggage into black contractor garbage bags left at the front desk. I want them to wake up to a world where the artificial floor has completely dropped out from under their feet. This is where the structural reality of their choices manifests its brutal truth. Madison's entire identity was built exclusively on the things she possessed, rented luxury, a leased zip code, and an aesthetic status she had never spent a single drop of sweat earning. By systematically stripping away my hidden subsidies, I was forcing her to confront her absolute lack of substance. It wasn't spite, it was accounting. By 10 in the morning, I was sitting quietly in my old truck down the block from the Tribeca building. I watched the county sheriff tape the emergency eviction order to the heavy glass doors, while a flatbed tow truck hauled the white Porsche away. Madison stood on the pavement in her cloud-like silk robe, screaming frantically at the unyielding deputies, while her designer shoeboxes were piled haphazardly on the damp concrete. She looked like a raw, panicked parasite whose host had finally grown teeth. By Sunday afternoon, the battlefield expanded from residential real estate to absolute corporate warfare. Arthur Blackwood called my private line again while I was sitting in my quiet home office in Queens, staring at the raw financial data of Vanguard Steel. This wasn't a sudden, overnight whim. My team had been quietly accumulating blocks of shares and buying out distressed silent partners for the past 6 months, waiting for the perfect moment to trigger the trap. I had quietly finalized the private acquisition of Vanguard at exactly 6 in the morning, acquiring the controlling shares from silent partners who had no idea who was executing the buy. I was tracking numbers, not emotions. Patricia, the forensic accounting team has just broken through the secondary firewall of Vanguard's North American division, Blackwood said, his voice dropping into a deadly serious register. You need to see this ledger. The financial discrepancy isn't just an operational deficit. It's a systemic embezzlement scheme totaling $3,400,000. A cold, heavy memory flashed behind my eyes, sharper than any fire. 20 years ago, Vanguard Steel was a thriving enterprise, co-founded by my late husband. Douglas Vance was a junior partner back then, a slick manipulator who used forged accounting entries and false corporate audits to frame my husband for structural negligence, successfully pushing him out of the board. The stress of that public humiliation caused my husband's fatal stroke 3 weeks later. I had spent 2 decades building Novak Industrial, patiently accumulating capital and tracking Douglas Vance's greed, knowing his arrogance would eventually make him sloppy. Now, the trap was absolute. He didn't just steal corporate cash, Patricia, Blackwood explained, his keyboard clicking over the line. Douglas Vance systematically skimmed $3,400,000 by inflating corporate healthcare premiums and diverting unremitted employee pension contributions into an offshore shell company registered in the Caymans under RVD Holdings. He used that stolen healthcare collateral to secure personal loans worth $7,200,000 to fund his leased mansion, his lifestyle, and his daughter's $175,000 plaza wedding. And there's a secondary signature on the internal wire authorization forms, Blackwood continued, pausing for a brief second. It's a signature mismatch on the compliance audits. Caleb's accounting stamp is all over these files. Your son has been signing off on his father-in-law's fraud for the past 6 months, completely manipulated into compliance to keep his wife happy. The realization didn't break me. It clarified the target. They weren't just classist, ungrateful snobs. They were white-collar criminals who had built their entire kingdom on the stolen blood and healthcare of working-class laborers. They had violated every regulatory law and personal boundary code in existence. Contact the District Attorney's Financial Crimes Unit immediately. Arthur, I ordered, my teeth gritted. Have a corporate fraud investigator on standby for Monday morning. Douglas Vance thinks he's walking into a promotion ceremony. I want him walking out in handcuffs. And as for my son, let him feel the full, unyielding weight of the ledger he chose over his own mother. Monday morning arrived, sharp and unforgiving. I didn't wear flannel today. I wore a tailored $6,000 charcoal Italian suit, solid gold cufflinks, and stepped out of a Blacktown car in front of the Vanguard Steel Tower in Manhattan. Flanked by Arthur Blackwood and 2 burly security contractors with earpieces, I rode the executive elevator straight to the 45th floor boardroom. When the doors slid open, Douglas Vance was pacing the reception area, sweating through his shirt, frantically screaming into his phone about Vanguard's stock price dropping due to hostile takeover rumors. He spun around, saw me, and his eyes bulged in absolute shock. But his classist delusion still wouldn't allow him to see the truth. "Patricia," he barked, marching over with sweaty fury. "What the hell are you doing here in that ridiculous suit? Did you come to beg me to stop the zoning eviction on your Queen's Yard? I told you last night I need a $200,000 personal liquidity bridge loan, or I will crush your little scrap metal business by noon. Sign the guarantor papers right now, or you're ruined." I looked at him, my face an unreadable block of stone. I didn't say a word. I just pushed past him, opened the heavy mahogany double doors of the boardroom, and walked straight to the leather center chair reserved for the chief executive officer. The 6 members of the board of directors were already seated in dead silence. Douglas stormed in behind me, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. "Get out of that chair, you crazy scrap metal witch." "That is my seat." "Sarah? Call security and have this trailer park trash dragged out of the building." Sarah Jenkins, the board's corporate secretary, didn't look at Douglas. She stood up, bowing her head slightly toward me. "The board welcomes our new majority owner and chairman Patricia Novak. The acquisition was finalized at 6 a.m. Douglas staggered backward, hitting the wall as if he had been struck by a physical wave. No, she's a mechanic's widow. She runs a scrapyard. I leaned forward over the massive table, pulling the crumpled $50 bill he had thrown at my face out of my pocket and smoothing it flat onto the wood. "I am the scrapyard, Douglas," I said, my voice echoing like thunder. "And I just bought your entire life." Arthur read the audit. Blackwood stepped forward, signaling the two state fraud detectives waiting in the hallway. Within 2 minutes, Douglas Vance was spun around against the glass windows, his wrists clicking into cold steel handcuffs for the $3,400,000 embezzlement. He looked at me, his eyes wide with a pathetic, naked terror, begging for mercy. I didn't offer a single drop. "Goodbye, Douglas," I said coldly. "Enjoy the view from the bottom." The operational collapse of their fake empire was instant. Down in the marble lobby, Madison and Caleb were waiting, evicted and desperate, only to watch Douglas walk out in handcuffs. Madison fell to her knees, weeping, trying to bargain with her pregnancy, offering to name the unborn baby after me if I dropped the charges and gave them the Tribeca penthouse back. I stepped back, brushing my pant leg as if she had left a stain. "Ghosts don't provide luxury housing, Madison," I told her. Caleb stepped forward, begging for a bridge loan, claiming at least he still had his head accounting job at Midwest Logistics, Vanguard's primary shipping subsidiary. I handed him a white envelope. "I acquired control of that subsidiary 4 years ago, Caleb. I installed the executive team that hired you. You are terminated, effective immediately. Learn what it feels like to work for $1 instead of waiting for it to appear in your account." 6 months have passed since that morning. Vanguard Steel's corrupt structure has been thoroughly purged. Their transactional marriage collapsed into a messy divorce within 3 months, once the credit limits hit zero. A mandatory court medical assessment during the legal proceedings quickly revealed that Madison's tearful pregnancy claim at the lobby was just another calculated lie, a desperate stunt to secure my millions. I delivered the full forensic files to the district attorney, ensuring Douglas faced the maximum federal sentence. For Caleb, I used Vanguard's new legal team to prove his gross negligence rather than criminal intent. He escaped a prison cell, but the court stripped him of his accounting license permanently and loaded him with a massive civil restitution fine. He will spend the next 20 years paying back every single dollar he helped steal. Last week, I drove past a lumberyard and saw Caleb wearing a high-visibility vest, manually sweeping iron dust and sawdust for minimum wage. He looked thinner, but for the first time in his life, his spine looked straight. He is finally learning the mechanics of an honest day's labor. I didn't keep the corporate millions for personal luxury. I gutted Vanguard's old abandoned manufacturing facility and established the Novak Industrial Trade Institute, a world-class training center where tuition is completely free for the children of working-class laborers. Absolute justice is not achieved through simple destruction, but through purposeful reconstruction. We don't build monuments to our anger, we build spaces where the next generation can flourish. Looking back on this entire journey, I've come to realize that true wealth can never be measured by the balance in your bank account or the zip code of your property. It's measured entirely by the unyielding integrity of your character. If you find yourself in a similar situation, always remember that letting go of a toxic connection isn't a betrayal of family. Sometimes it is the only way to set yourself free. Forgiveness is a gift you give your own peace of mind, but it never requires you to rescue ungrateful people from the consequences of their own choices. If this story reminded you that character always outlasts cash, hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to join our community of builders. Let the dust settle exactly where it belongs.